Hello, everybody. I'm Ben Coleman, one of your hosts here at Florida Aviation Network, coming to you clear in the clear, live in the clear on Florida Aviation Network. We're streaming live literally from the 41st Annual Sun and Fun Expo and Fly-In. And it is always, it's sun and fun. Sometimes it's been thunderstorm and fun, but it's always been fun watching people scurry and run, try to stay dry. But we're having fun here. We're all like-minded folks, and we've had a very, very safe event, and that's the way we like to have it, because that's what we're here for. It's aviation safety. That's why Florida Aviation Network was developed, and we're here. Every one of our topics, our guests and our interviews has a thread of safety involved in it. And to all of our volunteers, even this guy on the end, Mr. Roper, and his beautiful daughter beside him. If you're not able to come to Sun and Fun in person, please come to it virtually, and we'll try to give you as much information as we can. Today, we have another dynamic individual that does dynamic things in a dynamic industry and helps so many people, and that's why we want to always welcome back Steve Purello. Steve?
Thank you, Ben.
Welcome.
My pleasure.
And Steve, we know you're with Angel Flight, and a few people really understand all the aspects and how deep Angel Flight goes to help people, and to what extent and to what your area of responsibility is. What do you do for Angel Flight, and what is your territory? What's your geographic area?
Sure. Angel Flight Southeast serves the population of the state of Florida, sometimes Bahamas, Puerto Rico, and U.S. Virgin Islands. And we're a partner with the Air Charity Network. We're one of the members. And when we connect into the Air Charity Network flies people all over the U.S. So we do flights, medical help up to 1,000 miles if somebody needs to go get that specialized care.
And what do you have to charge for that flight up to 1,000 miles for medical?
Absolutely nothing. It was a good leading question there.
But Steve, I know that you're individually a wealthy individual, and all of the people associated is wealthy, but wealth is not always measured in the amount of dollars in your bank account. And I know that you guys get so much payback just from the success stories of what you're able to do, and how your volunteer staff and your group is able to do it. There's a few people that do, you got to make a paycheck at some point, but the payback, really, from what I have learned about your organization, is the thrill of knowing that you're helping people, and how you can help them save lives and perpetuate life.
Absolutely. The group of pilots that do this, the 650 pilots that are under us, are incredible people.
Is that worldwide or nationwide?
No, that's just our region.
Just your region, 650 pilots.
Yep. Yeah, so this is an organization is made up of these volunteer pilots. They're donating their time, their fuel, their airplane, and they're not necessarily super wealthy people, but they give incredibly, and generously. Mm-hmm. We're really proud of the people that do the work for us.
Yeah, Stephen, absolutely. That was tongue-in-cheek about the wealth,
I figured.
because it's I found out how to make $1 million in aviation.
Start with 2.
There you go. And after the first million's gone, you cut it off. Hey, I just made $1 million. But it's not always about the money. And I have had the opportunity to go to your facility at Leesburg.
Right.
And the network that you have is just fascinating. And the work that is involved in supporting that and keeping it going is tremendous. And I know you have an office staff there, very, very dedicated people. But at any given time, you're fielding calls, and how do you match the pilot or the aircraft and the mission? How do you do it? It still amazes me.
Thank you. I'm glad you got to see some of what happens behind the scenes. But it's a staff of 2, basically myself and our lead air traffic controller. We have 1,000 volunteers altogether. 650 of them are pilots, and the work that our air traffic controller Kathy is doing is that of really a small airline. We're doing a few thousand missions a year, and each one of those is with a different pilot, a different airplane, different destination. And so, it's not like an airline that's going back and forth with the same pilot, the same airplane, the same, origination and destination, but these are all custom flights for them. So a lot of it is done through our software. We have an incredible software that we run, and a lot of it is just hard work, answering those phones not only during the day and being able to coordinate those missions, but a lot of these calls are coming in, in 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We answer the phones 24/7. So when a request comes in for a transplant mission, we've got 36 people right now waiting for a liver, a kidney, a lung, 2 lungs, a heart. And when those calls come in, we answer the phone in the middle of the night. We have a list of 10 pilots that have said, yes, I'm willing to take that flight. And generally we have only about 3 hours in which to get that patient there to be able to get that organ. Otherwise they are not going to get that organ.
That's a tight window.
So yeah.
And Kathy, you mentioned Kathy, and she's your air traffic controller?
She's our air traffic controller, yes. Coming
I
from the FAA, I thought you'd appreciate
air
that.
traffic controller, I get the tie-in now, but it's an awful lot of good hard work, and I was choked when I heard that it's really 2 of you.
Yeah.
And so, well, what happens if Kathy gets sick? Then I do it.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
What happens when you get sick? Then Kathy does it. All of it. What happens when you and Kathy get sick? And you do have some fallbacks.
We've got some very dedicated volunteers. We're located, the Leesburg office is located just south of the Villages, and the Villages are a great location for us to have retirees. Many of them, past FAA or pilots, and they come down and help out and work during the day to pick up the phones and coordinate those missions. Yeah.
And I would like to think that some of your former transplant receivers are some of your strongest advocates.
They are. As a matter of fact, a gentleman named Bill Brooks came to our Pilot Awards event a couple of weeks ago, and it happened to be the exact day that it was his 5-year anniversary of having received the heart of a 22-year-old. He's now mid-60s, and so he's just doing great with his heart, for 5 years now, getting around. He drove a van for us all day. He's an amazing person.
Wow. Steve, how did you get involved and get started in this? And we do have some time to elaborate and expand, but what brought you into Angel Flight Southeast?
I was a pilot looking for something else to do other than the proverbial $100 hamburger flying around in the New York area. And I was a bad kid, so the combination of the two, there must be something I can do to make up for misbehaving myself.
I don't believe it. But,
and it's the same way we recruit most of our pilots today. I saw a brochure with a cute little girl on the front, and signed up one day. You do one mission, and that's it. I mean, you absolutely fall in love with the aspect that these are people that did nothing to deserve the illness that they have, and they wind up in a situation where even if they had the money originally or they had the strength originally, when they get an unusual disease and they've got to go 4, 5, 6, 800 miles to be able to get the treatment they need, and they need to do that 20, 30, 50 times, even the person with resources becomes pretty well tapped. And you realize very quickly that what you're doing is a direct benefit and helping them.
How do you guys deal with weather, Steve? I'm just curious with the weather. I mean, you got to launch. You got a low pressure area that's kind of moved in, and you want to try as best you can. But how do you cope with that?
Absolutely, and so we like to say and I do a lot of the safety training that takes place with the newer pilots. And what we like to say is these people, if they're not treated, are going to die, but not for the next few months if they don't get their flights. They're not going to die in the next few hours. So we insist with our passengers that they have a backup plan, and the backup plan is inevitably going to be they'll go the next day. So we always tell our pilots, please do not feel pressure that if you don't feel well, if your airplane is not 100%, if the weather isn't exactly the way you want it, don't worry about it, give us a call. We'll reschedule them and they'll get that appointment the next day.
How do you, and this may be not fair ground to get you on, but how do you insulate your pilots for the most part? Because in the EMS industry, the pilot or the crew is trained not to get involved or not to become emotionally attached or committed to what's going on in the back, because I'm going to land this helicopter in that little spot down there if it kills me. Well, unfortunately, sometimes it does, because they're not going to let little Jessica perish because they didn't have the guts to shoot that approach.
Right.
But if they don't know that it's little Jessica that looks just like their daughter in the back, they're a little bit insulated. How do you guys insulate your folks from not becoming too engrossed in the mission as opposed to the accomplishment of the flight?
Right. Yeah, and again, these are chronic conditions, not emergency. We're not picking someone, little Jessica, up from a car accident in which she needs to go 4 miles to the closest hospital immediately. We're picking up someone that little Jessica, was born with this unusual cancer, and she needs 20, 30, 40 treatments that are hundreds of miles away. That if she doesn't get the treatment on Tuesday, that's okay. She'll get it Wednesday. So there's really no reason, and we continually hammer this home with our pilots. There's no reason that flight absolutely has to go that day.
Good, because they're really not emergency flights; they're urgency flights.
Correct. In medical terms, they're chronic conditions, not acute conditions.
Okay. Okay. Well, that explains an awful lot, and I wanted to explain that to because some people might think that the Angel flight is like the EMS.
Sure. And
they're similar, but not.
Sure.
I mean, the criticality is not there.
Sure.
What is the kind of the typical aircraft that you guys would use, or is there a typical aircraft?
Well, it's funny. It ranges all the way from maybe a 172, for our non-flying audience, a single engine, small engine, 4-seater airplane, all the way up to a gentleman that flies his Citation 10, the world's, I think currently it's the world's fastest, business jet out there. Mm-hmm. And this gentleman does 2 or 3 families at a time, and he'll fly them. But primarily the heavy lifting is getting done by single engine, 4-seater piston aircraft, possibly twin engine, 6-seat piston aircraft.
And the majority of your, you don't call them customers or clients or patients. What would you call the recipient of your benefit?
Yeah, in fact, we avoid the term patients, one, because we do take people that don't have medical conditions, maybe veterans or people who want to get out of a natural disaster, but also because we're not the doctors, we don't call them patients, so we just call them passengers.
Passenger? Yeah. Okay, it's just passenger 1, 2, or 3, or you have a mother that goes with their children or father?
Typically, yeah. In fact, we limit the weights to 500 pounds, including 50 pounds of luggage. Mm-hmm. And we do that so that our whole fleet of single engine and twin engine 4 or 6-seaters can accommodate 500 pounds. Very few of them would have an issue with that. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we usually encourage the passengers to maybe keep it to 1 adult and a child, or 2 adults, that sort of thing, so that even more of our pilots feel it's comfortable to take those flights. Mm-hmm.
How do you interact and get along with the federal authorities, the FAA? I mean, what do they recognize you as a Part 91 operation, or 134.5, or do they try to tie you into a charter service, or have
so we wouldn't even be considered a 91 operation because we are just the volunteer pilot organization. All we do technically is coordinate flights. Mm-hmm. So if I'm on the phone, I call up a pilot and find someone, it's up to him under his Part 91 rules, or maybe a 135 if it happens to be a company that's doing it, to be able to maintain his FAA currency and standards. And when I take off my hat and I become a volunteer pilot, and instead of being executive director, same thing. Mm-hmm. So there's very much a wall that's up between Angel Flight Southeast and the pilots.
So you're actually a network coordinator of these events, and not the operator of
That's a good
event.
Description, yes.
Okay. Yep. And hopefully everyone understands the difference between that, because to be an operator these days, there's a lot of responsibility. And again, when you take one hat off and put another hat on, you've got to really switch gears and remember, what do you fly? I'm just curious.
Just to finish with your question, we just worked recently with the FAA at the beginning of the year with a new program. They had some issues with third-party identifiers. Mm-hmm. And mostly third-party identifiers would be like a Delta 501, Flight 501. That's not their tail number, right? Mm-hmm. So they're calling themselves 501 while they're in the air. We call ourselves Angel Flight, and we get a special NGF in front of our tail number. they had some issues with people misusing it. They called us, we worked with them, and now we have our pilots all have a 4-digit PIN. So you'll actually, the controllers can see NGF, the number 3, which is for Angel Flight Southeast, and 3 more digits for that pilot. So the FAA can identify the pilot rather than the aircraft. The aircraft is still in the remarks section, but they were incredibly good to work with. They couldn't tell us how much they appreciated what we did. They couldn't stop trying to do for us, make it as least invasive as possible, and work with a solution, that would keep everyone safe from a terrorism standpoint, because that was their primary concern, but to make sure that our flights still took off. And so I greatly appreciate the FAA's work. I applaud them.
And is it a 3-digit or a 3-number PIN?
It's 4 altogether. The first one identifies us as Angel Flight Southeast, which is the 3, and then 3 more digits after that.
And has this been adapted nationally, or is this?
It has.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, as of January 1st, it was official.
Okay, good. Because it's so organization, and and we keep compelling folks to get involved with aviation because it is so well organized. There's always room for improvement.
Absolutely.
And how often do you folks go through and do I don't want to say clean house, but when do you check your pulse and make sure you guys are doing things just as good as can be done?
Well, we have a database, again, back to that software that tracks all of this. So the pilot will go in each year and be able to verify all of the minimum requirements that we hold, such as insurance and currency and number of hours, et cetera. And that keeps us to keep track of everything. As far as the aircraft as such are concerned, it's really up to the pilot. Again, there's a wall between us and they. Part 135, we would have to worry about the maintenance, but in this case, they absolutely do.
Okay, I have a mall, an M4 mall. If I wanted to donate and dedicate some of my time to get on your books, how would I do it?
Is a very streamlined process on angelflightse.org, short for Southeast, and you can go in there and put all the information. We do ask for 250 hours minimum PIC time. That's a time that we found, it makes the pilot not only comfortable flying the plane, but if people are fidgeting around in the back, right, that they're that comfortable enough they can fly with strangers in the back. We ask for an instrument rating in some of the other states that we fly in, but in Florida we don't require that instrument rating. And actually, we had 34 of our pilots fly in to F-45 North Palm County 2 weeks ago today, and that airport doesn't have a tower. In fact, it didn't really have enough tie downs, but incredibly smoothly, these 34 pilots, 34 airplanes all came in, and we had a very large pilot awards gala 2 weeks ago to recognize these guys. We're just, they don't get enough attention, and we had a family called the Dr. Norris Foundation go ahead and sponsor us, and we brought all of them in. We actually had 42 pilots altogether for the night, plus their spouses. They got Pilot of the Year recognition in their region or category. The categories included transplant, they included rookie, they included above and beyond in case they had done more for the charity other than just flying. And we created a new award called the Dr. Norris Award because Dr. Norris was a thoracic and cardiovascular surgeon in Florida, in Orlando. He was also a World War II vet. And so the family wanted to do something special in his name. They gave us a large donation to be able to do this. And Alan Hoffberg, one of our board members and pilots that I think you know, won our inaugural Dr. Norris Award for serving his country, the pilot that exemplified serving his country the most in the past year. So it was a really great event. We're looking forward to doing it again next year and recognizing these pilots.
So I go online and submit my request or my to become one of in your group, and I show you I have 2,000 hours commercial multi-instrument. What's the next step? What do you do? Do you come and inspect my aircraft, or do I fly to Leesburg and let you put me under the microscope, or how do we do this?
Again, not being the actual operator of the aircraft and not hiring any of these pilots, That's not the responsibility of a volunteer pilot organization. Our responsibility is to merely coordinate all of the flights. So no, we would absolutely not ask you to do that. It is up to the pilot to be able to meet the FAA standards.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's with 650 pilots under your umbrella, if you will, here in the South or the state of Florida.
Yeah.
That's a lot to coordinate. I mean, keeping track of contact information, location, where the medical facilities are, where they need to get. You and Kathy are the ones that do that?
And a good group of volunteers that we oversee, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. And how many at one point, what can you recall was the most challenge, where it required the most amount of people to coordinate getting someone smooth safely from one spot to another, as far as coordination? How many people would you involve?
Primarily, it is Kathy that will do it, with a couple of volunteers that come in. Because these are chronic conditions and we are flying the same people frequently, the only relief that we do wind up getting is that once they're in the system and put in with the medical information, et cetera, then the repeating process becomes a little easier. The funny thing about that is, for every flight that we schedule, we actually, or I should say, for every flight we fly, we have to schedule it twice on average, almost twice, because the doctor changes the appointment, the patient isn't feeling well, and so they call us up and we have to start all over again. So that keeps us particularly busy.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, I know that you probably have a lot of very unusual situations that pop up from time to time. Hopefully all the outcomes are good, but there's got to be an occasion where there's a snag, or somebody gets on and they're really not feeling good and they're really not too sure about, I got air sick one time. I don't know if I can take it with my chemo the way it's working in. That's got to be a challenge.
Well, air sickness is one of the things that we screen them for and talk to them about and explain. We even have videos on the site so they can understand this is not a 737 for American Airlines, but a 172 we're taking you in. Mm-hmm. And so we make sure that we try to take care of that. The other thing, what's interesting is when we're flying them and we're getting them chemotherapy, we're bringing them back as soon as they've gotten that chemotherapy. So before the effects have even kicked in, and they're feeling poorly, they're already back in their bed. Mm. So it's really a beautiful thing to be able to use general aviation to fly these people and get their appointments.
Steve, there's got to be the occasion that you take the person that's a little apprehensive.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't fly little airplanes. I've been in Delta and United, American, all that, but I don't do little airplanes. But for some reason, it just works out better to get them in GA. And at the end of the trip, they think, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
I had no idea. The freedom. And what are the success stories, or have there been any that have gotten involved in aviation as a result of their Angel Flight experience?
And I would say, sadly so, most of these people have financial difficulties as well. So we're probably not the kind of person that can now be inspired and start an aviation career or purchase an airplane. A lot of people, though, it has opened their eyes to general aviation and the usefulness and safety of general aviation.
Well, even what I call the fence hangers, the ones that go to the airport and just like to watch.
Right.
I'm sure that there's so many more that we probably don't even know how many that have had that positive of an impact on them.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that that's where I live. People look down and they don't realize the different dimension when you're able to get up off the ground. What else do you see coming up as far as the future of Angel Flight, particularly Southeast? Where are you going to grow?
When we were sitting here last year, and maybe just a little earlier than that, we had a real struggle with the number of pilots, or at least the number of missions that were getting filled by pilots. There is a pilot shortage out there that we can see, and I think being in the state of Florida, we are maybe one of the last states to feel it, because at least retirees are coming down here bringing their airplanes, and then we get the benefit of those pilots. But certainly a year ago we felt it, and we had lost approximately 80 pilots due to either illness or financial reasons or death. And And so we had to really put the pedal to the metal and go out there and recruit pilots. And I'm very happy to say by the end of the year, we had recruited 100 new volunteer pilots to be able to join the organization. And it's one of the reasons we did that Dr. Norris Awards, because as much as you want to go get new customers, which in our case would be pilots, engaging with your existing pilots to get them to fly more is much more fruitful. And back to that Norris Awards that we had done, I'm very happy to say we had gotten lots of donations from Pilot Mall. Pilot Mall that's here and Neil Glazier. He went out and got a number of his manufacturers that he would normally purchase from, donated items to us, and we put it on auction for the pilots that came to that gala, and had an incredible response where they were getting great deals on safety equipment and other aviation items. And yeah, they're right here on the field and selling lots of Sun and Fun merchandise, and we greatly appreciate what they did for us.
Well, where do you see it going, Steve, as far as the growth or the aspects of how much do you want to grow, or is there an end to where you can grow it? Would you like to have 1,000 pilots in aircraft?
Now that we're starting to tackle the pilot issue better because of the initiatives, I would say we go back to getting the word back out there. As you mentioned about the fence hangers, I think a lot of people still don't know about the services that Angel Flight Southeast provides, and we want to do more outreach and getting the word out. And we're going to be concentrating on that significantly over the course of the balance of 2015. I'm very happy that Angel Flight West, which is one of our partners, created something called the Endeavor Awards. And the Endeavor Awards have that goal as well. They wanted to be able to tell the general public about public benefit flying. And so they created these awards that are given each year to the top 3 pilots that they felt have given the most back to public benefit flying. It's in May each year under the Space Shuttle Endeavor. You can practically touch it while you're sitting there having dinner. And surprisingly, my board actually wound up nominating me for the Endeavor Award, and even more surprisingly, I was chosen as one of those 3 pilots this year to be given the Endeavor Award in Los Angeles.
Well, that's a congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, 19 years of flying as many as 25 missions a year.
Wow.
And my board had felt like turning around Angel Flight Southeast was an important reason to do it. So they will get national exposure to public benefit flying, and I hope really as a result of that we'll get more passengers to know that these services are available for them.
Well, Steve, it's always a pleasure to have you here, and I want to find next year that you're up to 1,000 pilots.
Sounds good.
In aircraft, and all the success stories, and I am going to ping you for some success stories that are just a little bit beyond and outside of the box of things that we wouldn't normally think about.
Love to.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Ben. Thank you.
And again, from here at the set of the Florida Aviation Museum, and this is Ben Coleman, one of your hosts, Florida Aviation Network. See you next interview.